Well, hello everyone. Welcome to World at War Comics. I am very excited to have Maytal Zchut on the podcast to talk about Sisterhood, which just came out this week. So if you haven't picked it up, what's wrong with you? It is another Ghost Machine title from Hyde Street. Wait until you check this out. And then we're going to talk a little bit, hopefully, about DEVOUR, which was her very first title. But Maytal, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me, Tommy. I'm really excited to be here. I'm honestly doing really well after the release of the book, the first book. Like it's been going great because I see I've gotten a lot of really positive feedback, so that really warms my heart and it just makes me feel really good about putting it out there.
Yeah, you should be very happy and very proud of what you did. I do listen, I watch a lot of YouTube videos and I like to look what people kind of picked for their week, like what their best titles were. And I will tell
Mhm.
you, Sisterhood showed up on a bunch of different like top of the week titles. So hopefully that makes you feel good. A lot of people read it and they're like, wow, that was pretty amazing. So
That's
congratulations.
awesome. Thank you. Thank you. I'm really hoping I can keep that up for the rest of the books. And I'm so stoked that people really enjoyed this. It means a lot to me that they enjoyed it, but I'm also glad that the readers were able to take what I wrote and understand it and really take it to heart, you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, we were talking before we hit recording. Well, especially Devour, that title kind of got me shook a little bit because I could definitely lose a few pounds myself.
No,
I need
no, no,
I
you
need Devour in
can't.
my life, I think. But after
No
reading
one
this,
needs Devour in their life except the book. They need the book, but not the product.
fair enough,
Yeah.
fair enough. But after reading that, I was like, wow, that is such a relatable like topic for I think most people. Like we all go
Mhm.
through that, especially as you get a little bit older, you have a family, you work a lot, I sit and drive a lot. All of a sudden you're like, man, I probably didn't need that burrito on the way home when I know dinner's gonna be made. So those type of things, and you're reading that and you could see how something that is so emotional for a lot of people could be used in such an evil way to capture people so that she could get her count up. But hopefully, we could get more into that because I would love to know where this came
Absolutely.
from in your experience. But before we get into that, Maytal, if we could, I'd love to ask this question. I would love to know where storytelling began in your life. Where did this passion begin? And was there one person or a couple people in your life that were like, wow, Maytal is really good at storytelling. You really should start going in this direction.
That is a really interesting question for me, I think, because Um, honestly, storytelling for me started from TV. Like it definitely came from the TV side of things rather than comics. And I've talked a little bit about it on other podcasts, but like TV was how I got into comics. And I started, by watching shows like, Buffy and Angel and Charmed and all of these things that like really influenced um my view of television in general. And I knew from a very young age that I wanted to work in TV. I knew I wanted to be a creative force in television. Like that was extremely important to me because I could see the type of storytelling that I was seeing on screen. And I wanted to be able to do that and give that to other people because I had a lot of ideas in my own brain that I wanted to be able to one day put on a page. Now, what happened was when I got to college, I took a writing course and I was really excited. It was a television writing course, and I was so excited to take this class. And ended up being divided into groups where we had to write whatever the rest of the group wanted to write. So it was a spec pilot. So it was based on a show that was already existing. And everyone in my group wanted to write a comedy. And I was the only person in the entire class, not just my group, who wanted to write a drama. And everybody wanted to write a comedy. So I had to learn the style of comedy writing and like, that kind of timing and that the joke telling and the how that goes, and I hated it. I had the worst time of my life. I thought I can't do this. I thought this is not what I wanted. This is not what I signed up for, and this is not that the difficulty was the problem for me. It just wasn't the type of storytelling that I really wanted to tell. I don't view myself as like a comedy writer, so it's not like something that really interested me. So I took this course, and after that, I was like, well, I'm never taking a writing course again. That was horrible. That was awful. That was the worst thing ever. I'm never doing that to myself again. And so I went through the rest of my college career pursuing more of like the production side and like things that were, related to storytelling, but not really, like kind of a little distant from that. And I did I went into assistant directing and stuff like that and learned like once I got out of college, learned how to be a production assistant. And when I was a production assistant, that kind of got me seeing the whole set. It got me seeing everything as a whole. And I got to see all of the different departments. And I slowly started to pursue going into the writer's room. And as I was doing that, it like restored my passion for storytelling. And it's interesting that you ask if there was anybody who like really encouraged me. And there definitely were later in my career, but it was once I was in my career because early on I didn't get that same encouragement because of, one professor that didn't really speak to me in that way. And so I feel like it started me off a little later, but at the same time, once I got back onto that, I found my passion, I found my voice, I found the types of stories that I wanted to tell. And was because I was so excited to take that class, I always kind of think back on that. Like right before that class started, I remember it was like winter break, and I started like writing like a pilot idea that I had because that's what I thought the class was going to be. I thought we were going to like write our own original ideas. I was so excited. I started to like jot down ideas and then that's not at all what that was. And it's funny because early on when I was like back in high school, I would create stuff all the time. Like that was like we used to go out with our friends and just like shoot movies and like little clips, and like for all of my class assignments that I could, I would make a movie for it. And so I was already really creative in doing this form of storytelling. So it's interesting that once I got to college, that actually sent me in the opposite direction of that. And then that I had to like rediscover that for myself. So that was like a difficult journey in a lot of ways, but I'm so glad that I found storytelling again because I always knew that I wanted to be this like creative force. So it's like, what does that mean? And once I discovered what that meant to me, I was able to go back into writing and really hone that craft by going into and working in writers' rooms. And then at that point, I had received a lot of encouragement from the people, the writers on the team, and the people that were working around me, and eventually people who became, like close friends or colleagues or whatever, like people who were there along the path to help, to read my stuff, to teach me. So there was a lot of people along the way that encouraged me, but that took a while to find, if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. And it's kind of sad when you walk into a situation and you're kind of hyped about it, you get a little excited, and then you get there and it's not what you were expecting. Like, was there anything that was helpful during that time? Because I assume you had to power through that, right? What were some of the things that were encourage you to power through, even though you were going through an experience that you're like, man, this is not what I was hoping for?
It's interesting because I kind of view myself as a person who like I don't really give up. Like I think that's one of the reasons I landed up here. Like it wasn't necessarily a linear path, but there's a reason that I'm here and, writing these stories. It's because at one point, there's something hit me where I was like, wait a minute, this was what I wanted to do. I wanted to tell these stories. But when you're younger, when you're like in college and high school and all those things, that's the time. And right after college, even like those are the times when you're figuring out what you want to do and who you want to be. So I don't think it was so, like that it pushed me off the path so far that I would like, I can never go back. But it just like made me have to really think like, is this what I want to do? Because at that time when I was doing something that I wasn't enjoying and I thought that was the only option because that was at the time in that class the only option I was given. I had to go and learn for myself that that wasn't the only option, that there are so many ways to tell a story and that there are so many different types of stories out there, and some of them that I want to tell, like those exist. Like I can make those personal to me and get that on the page, and that doesn't have to be that, that spec in the comedy class that I wrote that one time. Like even if and honestly, I went back like years ago, this was years ago, and I reread it and I was like, oh, this actually isn't as bad as I thought it was at the time when I was like really hard on myself, because I didn't do the all the formatting correctly and all this because I didn't know. I was just learning. But it's interesting because you could have people along your path who discourage you, and honestly, I think the best thing to do with that is to use it as fuel.
Yeah.
because there are always going to be people who doubt you, and there are always going to be people who think, well, this wasn't for me, so I don't like it, so I don't like you, or whatever. And you can't let those people get in your way. And that's kind of the lesson that I still try to keep telling myself, because obviously I'm thrilled when people like the books that I write, but like there are going to be people that don't, and that's okay. Like, and those are just more, that's just more fuel for me to do better next time. And that's kind of what I took from that experience, I'd say.
Yeah, I think that's such a good lesson, Maytal. You know what? I'm in the grocery industry, and I had a manager one time, and just a terror. And we've all worked for people, and you're like, how did this person get in a position of power? They're just so terrible at it. They're like, they don't like people, and so here they are,
Yeah.
people. And I remember another one of my coworkers came to me, and his father was the founder of a grocery chain in Southern California. And he goes, you know what, Tommy, my dad told me one time you can learn as much from a bad manager as you can from a good manager. And so going through that experience, even though maybe at the time it wasn't meeting your need, I'm wondering if you've been able to look back and say, you know what, although it didn't meet my need at the time, I did and was able to take away from maybe these one or two things that I'm now utilizing today in my own experience. I don't know if you've been able to kind of look back on that over time and had that kind of experience from that.
It's interesting because I think because it was such a formative experience in a lot of ways, like what I learned from it was that I can't let like one experience like shake me or push me down or tell me you can't do it, or or one person that didn't necessarily believe in me. Not that they said anything particularly like bad to me, but I wasn't the top student in that class or anything like that. And I was just another kid trying to, like write a story and didn't do the greatest job. I wasn't the funniest kid in the class like that, and that's okay. Like you don't always have to be the best at everything, but you can learn, you can grow, and that's kind of what I learned from that. Is like I'm not gonna. That was a beginning experience, and what happened to me was I took that experience and said, "Well, I'm not taking a writing class ever again," and that was the mistake. And it's okay because I learned from that mistake. So I'm not mad about it. But the mistake was saying, I'm not going to take another writing class, because what I should have done was said, well, that wasn't for me, but I'm going to take another class and see what else I can learn. So now I know that. Now, in retrospect, I know that once I'm not in college and not taking courses anymore, and that, but like now I know that you can learn from every single experience, just like you're saying. Like, even if it's not the perfect teacher, the perfect mentor, the perfect, experience, you might get something from that. You might learn what not to do. You might learn, like a little tidbits, and take what's good for you and leave the rest. There's so many things you can learn from every single person, good or bad, at the job, or at teaching, or in general. And like that's what I do my best now as an adult to do that, like to really take every single lesson and internalize it and think, okay, is this serving me?
Yeah.
Is this helping me? Is this something I can take and use? And if not, then I don't need it, and that's okay. I'm going to find my own way. I just wish I knew that earlier, like
For sure. I think we
I just
all
wish
do,
I
right?
knew it earlier. Yeah.
I'm so happy and so thankful that you opened up like that, because I feel like a lot of people have this passion, especially if you're in comic books, you're reading comic books. I think all of us go through that stage where like, man, I feel like I could write a story too. And then you get discouraged. And so your
Hmm.
experience and what you just shared right now, I'm sure is going to encourage people to maybe it's just a different path. It's not the wrong path. Maybe it's just not the right path for you, but there is a path. You just got to find out what that path is. And obviously, we're sitting here today talking about a couple of your titles. You obviously found your path. And so, I mean, I think that's so encouraging, Maytal. I mean, that's awesome.
I'm so glad, and I hope that people who want to do this, like the thing that you have to do is do it, right? Like that's the hardest part, because back then, when I was in that course, I just didn't. I was too afraid. I was like, well, I'm not good at this, and I was afraid to be bad at it, and that's a huge like learning inhibitor. Because if you're saying I'm scared of being bad at XYZ, then you're never going to learn. Like, because you have to be okay with not everything being perfect. And honestly, as a perfectionist, I can say that because I want everything to be perfect, but I like have to let go sometimes. And it's better to write, like, what's the phrase? It's done is better than perfect. Like, because perfect does not exist, right? Like, that's the idea. Is it's like it's better that you finish something, put it out there, get it out in the world, learn what you didn't do right, or not right, but didn't do in the direction that could have been stronger. and then just learn from that and always be willing to take, criticism and instruction and learn from things. And like that's what I should have done. Even with that teacher that wasn't the best teacher, there was so much that I could have learned at the time. And I chose not to because I was so scared of being bad at this thing. So I said, I'm never going to take another class because I don't want to be bad again. And instead, that's not, you're never going to learn that way. Like it's okay to not be the best at everything. That's kind of what I try to tell myself too.
I love that vulnerability, and that's so true. And I think we all, at some point, could relate to that for sure. Even very recently, right? I feel like we all have these type of experiences. So thank you for sharing that. So you're at Emerson, you graduate, you do go into film. You kind of go in a little bit of different direction into film because of that course, it sounds like. But it sounds like you gained some amazing experiences as you were getting into film the first time. Can you kind of talk to what some of those first jobs were and how that like loop came back to being at a writer's table?
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay. So I think my experience, like at the time when I had it, was a somewhat like I would have said at the time that it was like conventional, like it was the path that people took to get into TV. I don't think that's true anymore because there's so many different paths. And then even back then, there were so many different paths. Like that's just how it is. There's a million different ways to get into the industry one way or another. I'm sure that's true for comics too. Like it's true for TV, it's true for a lot of industries. There's not like one clear cut way. But anyway, so how I did it was I was when I was still at Emerson, I did a semester in LA, which was kind of like a semester abroad, but it's not abroad, it's like, somewhere else that's not your campus. So we went to LA, like a lot of people, a lot of students, and I got an internship at the time at a place called Good Universe. And it was a small production company, and they were producing the movie Neighbors. I don't know if you remember that. It was a comedy at the time, yeah, which is funny because of everything I just said about I actually started working on a lot of comedies at first before I got back into like sci-fi and drama and all of the genre stuff. Like, so, but anyway, I
That's a wild
digress.
movie, by the way. It's a wild movie too.
Yeah, so they were producing this movie, and the movie was shooting in LA. And I worked very, very hard to get the opportunity to intern on that movie. So basically, I did all of my responsibility in my position at this internship, and then did more to kind of get myself in the position that they would even bring me onto the movie. And it was one of the greatest opportunities in my life. I still think about it to this day, like that really set me up for success. Because what happened was I ended up working on that movie. I ended up interning on that movie. And as an intern, you're not paid. You're basically working as a set production assistant, but you're not making any money on it, which at the time I could not have cared less. Like I was like, this is fun. I'm having the greatest time of my life. Like set is amazing. Like, and I was seeing all these things for the first time. Like I still remember my first day on set. Like it was just life changing because you're looking at this and you're like, wait, this is a real movie. Like this isn't not that college films aren't amazing and great and teach you so much, but when you get to a real like big budget set and you're like, oh my God, like this is what I've been working towards. Like this is insane. Like that is such a crazy experience, a wild experience. Like I still remember that feeling and that day. And it was one of the best days of my life, especially at the time. So I get to intern on this movie and then I leave to go graduate. And when I come back to LA, they basically offered me a set PA position to finish out the film. So I worked so hard that they were like, you can come and finish out the movie with us and we'll actually pay you.
That's awesome.
Which was like that's just like, I think about what a gift that was, but I also know that it was how hard I worked. Like that was just like a testament to my work ethic, which was always a very hard worker. Like, and so that got me that opportunity, like that afforded me that opportunity because not everybody got those opportunities at the time, not people at the company and not people who were doing kind of similar stuff to what I was doing on the film. So they hired me. And from there, it kind of just like it snowballed in a great way. Like I got I got another job after that, got the opportunity. I mean, I could get into detail of like, I started as like an additional set PA and then I got hired full time. Like it was things like that. And then once you have experience, people will hire you. But I used the opportunity I got on a show and I used the opportunity to start to decide where my path was going. And it kind of ties into what we were talking about earlier, because I basically was like, okay, now what do I want to do? Because it's like I'm in this position where I can see all the other positions and I don't know necessarily what direction I want to go in. And that's kind of when I rediscovered, like storytelling and that kind of stuff, and like going and moving into the writer's room. And like, the writer's room was held as like this very like an incredible opportunity to have, was like to be part of the writers room. And I thought to myself, maybe I can get back into that and go back in that direction that I once wanted to do. And also started to learn at that time that when I said like I want to be a creative force behind a television show, like what is that creative force? That creative force is the writers room. And so it started to seem like, okay, this is what I want to do. This is the path I want to go on. But even at the time, I was still figuring it out. I was really young and I was like taking the opportunity to learn. And so I got, and the one opportunity turned into another. And I like moved from being a set PA to an office production assistant, which got me one step closer to the writer's room. And then eventually I got a few shows doing that. And then from there, they hired me as a writer's production assistant. And then that got me, and that was like my first opportunity into the writer's room, which was on a comedy, just for
You can't get away from
just so
comedies.
yeah, literally. So at the time I'm learning from comedy, and it's funny because I was watching the room and I was still like, I don't know, because I don't really like this whole comedy thing. Like I don't like how the room runs, and I don't really love like the style and like the joke pitching and all that. But then I got this opportunity on a show called Beyond, which was on, I think it was on the CW before it was. No, it was on Freeform. That was what it was on. Before it was Freeform. So it was like ABC Family at the time. Doesn't matter. Anyway, so I get on the show, and I start as a writer's PA, and then from there the writer's assistant left. And again, like the work ethic thing, like I worked so hard every day after my I was done doing my writer's PA stuff, like duties. I would go and I would ask the writer's assistant, can you teach me how to do your job? And this was before I even knew he was like gonna ever leave. And then he left the show, which opened up the spot. And I went and he vouched for me. And I went and talked to the showrunners. And I was like, I really want to do this. Like, I want this position. I believe that I can do it. I believe that I can learn. And they gave me that opportunity. So I advocated for myself, which I had done when I wanted to be an office PA. So it was a lot of like advocating for myself to get back to where I wanted to be. And once I was in there and in that room, it was an incredible experience. I still have like friends from that show, and like it just was so it was such a like little family, and it taught me a lot about writing. And as being in that position that where I was closer now to the writers, I learned so much from these incredible writers. And then I started to really realize, like, it's not that I didn't know, because obviously I'm now moving in that direction. So it's like I'm doing it. But I started to be like, oh, like now I feel like another, like, I get it moment, like another moment for me that I was like, this is the right direction for me. And then I just kind of took it from there, and I got job after job, and I kept, working really hard and moving up the ladder. And like, that's what afforded me all these opportunities that I've had, is just like, you know, learning from these experiences. And at that time I started writing my own stuff, and like we're developing my own material and learning and honing that skill. So all of these experiences combined is like what taught me everything I know today. And getting back into the writer's room was it was like, it was something that I worked to do. And once it clicked for me, like, this is what I want to do. I remember sitting one day and being like, this is probably the hardest thing I'm ever going to do in my life, but if I want to do it, now is the time. Like, I remember having the thought, like, I literally was sitting there as it was on the comedy as a writer's PA, being like, okay, I'm here. Like, this is my chance. Like, if I want to do this, I need to work really hard and I need to pursue this and I need to learn and I need to do all these things. But if this is what I want to do, then now is the time to figure it. Like now is the time to do that, to push for it. And I did. And I never stopped. I never looked back from that point. Like it was that from that point on, it was I was dead set on like what I wanted to do and that I wanted to tell stories. And again, it tied back to like who I was when I was younger and all of those things that I did. And then I just kind of like found that again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
pretty incredible. Well, how did that end up on Stargirl with Jeff Johns? Like, how did that relationship get? Was that one of the last things that you did? Because you were on, didn't you work with Stargirl too?
Yeah, absolutely. So I worked on a show right before Stargirl called Katie Keene. And it's actually an Archie, it's in the Archie universe. Like, so it's a Riverdale spinoff. So it's in the Archie universe. So for comic book fans, like Katie Keene is a known character. Or like in that universe. And Katie Keene was an amazing show. I met some incredible people. And then and I was, working on that, and then COVID happened, and the show got ended up, getting canceled early, like prematurely, after only one season. And this was like the kind of show where you're like, okay, we're going to be on this for the next 5 years. Like that was kind of the idea, especially like watching Riverdale's success. And like you're on the CW, which was known to renew things at the time. So, you're thinking this is where I am. And then that was in the Berlanti universe, like Greg Berlanti, who created a lot of these, Supergirl and Superman and Lois and all of the shows that on the CW that are like superhero, The Flash. That's all Greg Berlanti, and he um was also in his universe, like in the Berlantiverse, was also Stargirl. And so I got introduced to Jeff through my connections on Katie Keene. So that's how I met Jeff for the first time, which is just like, it's like the
Great.
reason it's so wild to think about is because it's like all of these things that I had done and all of this work that I had done and everything, like it just like it kind of just led me down this path. And again, I like never gave up. I was working so hard and I wanted to do this. I wanted to be a storyteller. I wanted, so all of that, like traveling and then getting on the show that I thought I was going to be on forever. And then like that didn't happen. And I remember being disappointed at the time, like, oh my God, like my life is over. Like,
Yeah,
and then
I
like,
can see that.
because
Yeah.
that's what you think. Like it's hard to stop yourself from being discouraging towards yourself. And that's what I have to like pull myself out of it. And luckily I have like a great support system too that has helped me pull myself out of those moments. But then, I ended up on Stargirl. I had an incredible interview with Jeff. I still remember it. Like, and it was, like I just remember like how passionate he was about the show for obvious reasons. And like he it just like he exuded passion to the point where I remember previously in my career that was like something I was looking for. And I had been on a lot of shows where not to say that the showrunners like didn't care about the show, but there was a level of like where I thought I was finding like this passionate person, and then I was like really disappointed like by the like what I ended up being on, and there were like toxic environments earlier in my career. So there was like a lot of things that I just kept looking and looking for like someone who would care as much as I do, because
Yeah.
I care so much, and I could just tell from the second like that, he started talking about it. And I told him how incredible the show was and how much I loved season one, because it was such an incredible season of television. And we just had a really good, banter and vibe, and he hired me on the spot. And so I ended up on Stargirl. And then that is kind of what led me down, eventually to Ghost Machine after doing Stargirl for 2 seasons.
So here you go through this whole like back door into comic books. Where was
Yeah.
comic books in your life, if at all, before Ghost Machine? Like, did you grow up around comic books, or it just your writing ability and your relationship with Jeff Johns? He's like, I have an idea, and I think you could do something over at this publisher that I'm creating. Like, how did that come into comic books, and have you ever done anything similar to that before?
So that's such an interesting question, because before Ghost Machine, like after, so we're on Stargirl, and then like Ghost Machine hasn't been created yet, and we're start like that discussion between me and Jeff hasn't happened yet. And I started to pursue I started to like look into a way to start to pursue comic books as like to write comic books. I started to meet with people in comics. I started to talk to people who were writing comics, and I thought to myself like at the time, when Stargirl ended, like I was looking for a way to just continue telling stories. And I was thinking like this is something that I've never considered before. And I started to really consider it. And it wasn't that I wasn't, familiar with comics prior. It wasn't necessarily like it wasn't necessarily something that I grew up with. I came into it much later, but I was very familiar, especially having worked in like the Katie Keene world and like and on the art and reading those Archie comics and all of that stuff, and then getting into Stargirl, and I was reading a ton. And you're in those universes, so you're gonna be reading a lot of comics. And but it wasn't necessarily something that I had thought I would ever get into. So I start to look outside of what I'm doing, and I start to kind of explore, can I, move into comics more, so like continue in TV, but move into comics and start doing, work that is my own stories. And I'm meeting with people. I'm like, I met with some people at DC. I met with some people who wrote for Marvel and all these things. And then at the same time, Jeff and I are talking prior to this, about working together again, but we don't know in what context that'll be. Like, is he going to get another show? Are we, what's going to happen? So we know we want to work together again. I'm starting to pursue comics, but I don't tell Jeff yet. And I'll tell you exactly why. And I think all of my stories lead to this. So I didn't want to tell Jeff yet because I was like, I will tell Jeff once I have something concrete, once I'm ready to be like, here's the idea and here's what I'm doing. And I've got this other thing that I like someone, hired me or whatever, brought me on. Like, so I was waiting to tell him because I didn't want to just go to him and like waste his time or like, tell him something that wasn't fully formed. So I was waiting. And at that same time, he called me and was like, how would you like to learn to write comics? And which is like wild because it's like even the way that I've told like a lot of these stories, it's like you can say that it kind of just like the path, like the universe put me in the right place at the right time every time. But it was like so much harder than that, like actually living it and going through all of those difficult times and like trying and not failing, but trying and falling and then having to get back up again and push myself and push myself. And so when Jeff said this, when we were sitting, down at that table and he was like, how would you like to learn to write comics? I will mentor you in doing so. And I was just like, of duh, like of course, like there's no doubt in my mind. Like, and it kind of almost felt like all of these things that I had done and all of these moments in my life and all of my career led to this moment, where like we were sitting at that table and he asked that question. And it was like, this is what I've been waiting for in so many ways, and I've been working towards in so many ways. And now it's like finally here. And it was such an, I mean, it's only been more incredible since then, which is so, it's just, it is really incredible. And all of these people that I've met through it are amazing people. And I wouldn't trade it for anything, like anything.
Yeah.
And I feel very fortunate, but I feel grateful, but I feel very grateful to myself as well. Like, because I feel grateful to all the people who have helped me and lifted me. And I feel grateful to my past self for putting all this work in to get to where I am today. But yeah, I'm so grateful to, to Jeff for seeing my potential and seeing this in me and seeing, and I don't know if I mentioned it, but like when I was writing on Stargirl, like he really, the writing really that I wrote really spoke to him. And so that's kind of what was the ultimate push. Like we had really built that trust when we were on the show together. And like from that first interview to, to the day he asked that question, like, we're building trust and building our working relationship. And so like I do believe that that's kind of what ultimately got me down this road.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, you are literally working with, and you already know this, but probably the most influential comic book writer in the last 15 to 20 years. Like he's that big of a deal.
I
You know what
know
I
that
mean?
I know. Yes.
Like my love for comic books has a lot to do with his writing. Again, I'm
Yeah.
older, so I've read a lot of really amazing comic books, but his everything he did in Green Lantern. Green Lantern is made
Hmm.
because of Jeff Johns.
Absolutely.
So I mean, I
Agree
madly
wholeheartedly.
in love with that man. I just he's made such an impact on my joy for comic books. So for you to have that experience, I think is absolutely amazing. And what I also do know is everybody that's part of Ghost Machine he has worked with in I think a very like not superficial way, right? He's worked with these people on projects at mainly DC, but like in a really deep way. And for him to ask you means he made that same connection with you.
Yeah.
So that's incredible for him to see that kind of talent in you. And here you are writing a couple titles in Ghost Machine. I think that's so freaking awesome, man. Maytal,
Yeah.
congratulations. I mean, all that hard work.
Thank
And here you
you.
are today, busting into the comic book scene with a couple bangers.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and I will always like I obviously Jeff's writing is amazing and he already had taught me so much even before I ended up, as part of Ghost Machine and like he taught me so much. So in that moment, like I knew that this was my opportunity to learn and this was my opportunity to keep growing and become a better storyteller. And that just seemed it was so obvious to me like that this was the right path
Yeah.
for me.
Well, now you're able to take some of those stories that maybe you've been holding on to for a while and bring them to fruition. Can we talk a little bit about Devour? And then we'll obviously we want to talk
Yeah.
about Sisterhood too. So, can you talk about the story behind this? Like you said a little bit earlier, you have written some stories, you've had maybe some things maybe in your back pocket. Was this story about Devour something that you've been holding on to for a while, or did this all come kind of in the same way that you would? On set where you're all sitting around in a room and kind of all bringing ideas together and this developed out of that.
So I will I th it came basically from from me being like, what is a personal story to me? And that was later. It wasn't something I was holding on to. It wasn't like something that I had planned for years. It was like, okay, this is we're telling stories that are emotional and that are, personal to us in a lot of ways. Like obviously everybody has their way of telling that story. And I was thinking, I was sitting down and I was like, okay, what is something that is really personal to me? And then I started at the time I was going through a lot of stuff with this particular topic like with the idea of like my own self-image and like how I feel about myself and weight gain and weight loss and all of this stuff that I think a lot of people can relate to. And I didn't necessarily at that time say like everybody can relate to this, I'm going to write it. I thought like what is going on with me right now that I can turn into a story, and horror seemed so naturally like perfect for it because I'm like, this is a horrible, like, this is horror. Like, this is scary that we all like feel this way and feel this pressure. And that was the original like kernel of the idea for Devour. And I just took it and ran from there. And, Jeff has helped me shape it and help, but like, and so is Brian Cunningham, our editor, and obviously Layla's art is such a huge part of this story. And I still remember like when I was talking to Layla about it when we were first started talking about the story, and it's just like you can tell that it was personal to her too, and that was why we were able to tell the story in this way and for it to connect to people because it meant something to us. So it turned from like this kernel of an idea into a full story, but it started as just like what's personal to me, like what is something personal that I really want to talk about, like, and how can I do that?
Yeah. Well, it's extremely relatable, I think, for a lot of people. So I absolutely loved it. I love that her name is Miss Goodbody too. I think that is so hilarious. It's
I
awesome.
will say here, and yeah, that was a Jeff pitch.
Oh,
That
was
Miss
it?
Goodbody, the name was a Jeff pitch, and I think you can tell because
Yeah.
it's like, I won't ever take credit for something that someone else has done. So I'm like, yes, that was Jeff's idea. Like I had I think I gave her a different name, and he was like, no, like this is some like he knew the Hyde Street characters, and so he knew kind of what like the names that he was giving them and how they sounded in their voices and everything everything. And Hyde Street hadn't even come out yet, so we didn't really have a sense of like, what that was going to be. Because Hyde Street, the first Hyde Street book came out like earlier in the month when Devour came out.
Yeah.
So I hadn't read any Hyde Street yet. Eventually I did before it came out, but like, so he had a more sense of those characters that are the residents. So it was definitely Miss Goodbody as a Jeff idea, and I love it. I was like, that is perfect. How come I can't think of that?
Yeah, I
Like,
know. It's the
yeah,
perfect name for that type of a character. And the story is
literally.
quite tragic, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you read it, it's extremely tragic. Obviously, people wanting to get in better shape, they're taking her class, and she just pushes one person a little too far, and all of a sudden,
Well,
go ahead, please.
are you talking about the Hyde Street book, that Hyde Street
I,
5? Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
yes,
yes,
you're right. Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
Jeff
right.
and I talked a lot about that. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's such a good take on like her as a character,
yeah,
because we can that's what I love about the Hyde Street books in connection to like some of the stuff that I've written. And like Jeff takes those characters and he's like, okay, let me fully give them a backstory. Let me make them, you know, three-dimensional characters, and like that is really something incredible that he's able to do. And so I love Hyde Street 5 because it took Miss Goodbody as a character and it said, okay, like how did she get here?
yeah,
Which I think is really interesting because it all really ties together. And we had talked a lot while he was writing that book, because he was like, okay, this is the character you created, like how, what do you think about this and this? And so it was, in that way, that was really awesome. Like to me, that's such a great experience that Jeff's like, hey, I'm going to take your character and put it in, in my book. And now it's like just she's a Hyde Street resident, so that I think that's an amazing opportunity within itself on it being part of Ghost Machine.
absolutely. And what I thought was really unique about Miss Goodbody is once she is on Hyde Street, for someone that seems to be very secure in who she is, and obviously very aggressive in how she expresses that, she
Mhm.
won't leave where she's currently at. So there is a fear that she has of her own that now she's probably having to experience for the first time ever, maybe. I don't know. I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, you should keep reading. That's
Yeah, I
yeah, keep
know.
reading Hyde Street. You're
Exactly. Exactly. I
gonna
just got done reading seven, to your point. Well, six and seven, but yeah,
yeah.
I mean, there is like an insecurity for someone who seems to be so secure in who she is and what she's trying to accomplish. There's a major insecurity that she has of her own. I don't think Pranky helps either.
No, definitely not. No, but I agree with you because but that's what makes her so interesting, right? Is like, I mean, I think that's what's so interesting about the story of Devour too, is it's like obviously taking Devour and that is rooted in insecurity, right? Like, why are you doing something like this to yourself? Because you lack a certain confidence and you think that you'll have that confidence if you just take this product. And in some ways, if you read the story, if you read Devour, you can see that it does maybe give you some level of confidence, but what does it take away? Like what are you sacrificing and what are you doing? And the idea behind it really came from like this generational trauma of like, body shaming and like, passing it on to the next generation and to the next kid and the next, person in that line that is going to feel exactly the way that you did when you were younger before you started taking Devour. And like, and then it's like that's the idea behind it, is it's like passing this whole thing on, which is so real to like how we experience, like, why, when you think, why do I feel the way I feel about my body, why do I think I have to lose weight, like where does that all come from? And I do think obviously society is a huge part of it, but when you think about who taught you all these things, you look and you listen to the people that are, your parents and you're probably your siblings too, but like to the people around you that are saying things about their own body and criticizing their own body, and that just gets passed on to you naturally. You grow up and you think, oh, I have to criticize myself too, which is a real struggle, I think, for a lot of people. I know it is for me,
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Well, then we jump into Sisterhood, which just came out this week, and another tragic story. It
Yeah.
doesn't take too quick to get into that tragedy either, and you just feel like a knot in your stomach as you're reading it. But I would love to kind of know the genesis of this story as well, if you could.
Yeah, absolutely. So Sisterhood to me is a story about, what I would call like I think you have to read some of the rest of the books to kind of see where it's going. Absolutely, but but Sisterhood as a story to me is a lot about like an ending of a friendship. Like it's a lot about like, oh, whether you're gonna be there for your friend, what you're gonna do, like how you might react to that. And that does come from a personal experience of mine as well. I wanted to turn it into something that the characters took on a life of their own, like I wanted to turn it into something that could not necessarily just speak to people, but be entertaining and interesting and horror. And I thought about what character in Hyde Street makes the most sense to really be a part of these girls' experience. And like that also tied in like with the high street stuff. So that was really fun. But it did come from a personal experience of like an ending of a friendship, not necessarily in this like, this obviously it's not the same way. And you're because it's there's things that happen in that universe that are not true to our reality, but like that's what makes it so interesting is it's like taking a kernel of an idea that is personal and saying like, okay, well, how can I make this high street, or how can I make this different, or how can I make this more interesting, um, and kind of turn it on its head. So that I think is the genesis of it, but then the rest of it kind of came from as well.
No, 100%. Very relatable too. I think, if I look back on who my best friend was growing up, right? I probably haven't talked to them in many, many years, right? Because you get older, your likes and the things that you want to try and accomplish life maybe are different from your friend,
Hmm.
and you just kind of go apart a little bit, and I think that's very normal. This one is a little more tragic than that, but
Yeah.
in a very similar and more and very relatable way, it happens in the same way. But yeah, it was just beautiful. I'm gonna open it up. We'll show just a couple of the first few pages. We
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
want to
absolutely.
give
Show
anything
that
away.
art. Show
Uh,
Layla's art.
Layla's art
Layla is
is
incredible.
insane. Yeah.
Her art, like I will say, like while I'm writing these stories, like while I'm writing them to like I'm writing them to Layla basically. Like I'm like writing it and hoping that Layla will love it. So because that
Yeah.
she'll feel inspired and she inspires me with her. That's just beautiful.
It
Like
is.
I it
Yeah.
just
It's so
is.
sweet,
Yeah.
just frolicking through a forest.
Yeah. It's
I'm
so
trying not
yeah,
to
like
give away the story at the same time, but
yeah.
here's another great one too, college, and
Yeah, I love that.
doesn't give away too much, I don't think, but just the art is insane. It's just
Yeah.
beautiful. I got to get on her art. I got to find other stuff that she's done. We were talking about this earlier because it
Yeah.
is absolutely amazing. Is it Lies?
Lee's, Layla Lee's.
Layla Lees. Wow. I'll put all of her stuff below too. That way people could follow her and look at some of the other stuff that she's done as well. But amazing art.
She is so incredible, and I will just say she is an amazing person. Like Layla and I have really developed our relationship from when we did Devour to now. Like when we did Devour, it was a different process because we were still getting to know each other. And yes, like we both had this relatability with the story, but like I was seeing the pages and then kind of reacting to the pages, and it was just kind of this back and forth. And then what happened was we met in Italy back in November. I was with my wife in Italy, and we met because Layla lived in Italy. We met in person, and that was the first time we had ever met in person. Everything else before that was over Zoom, and we met. And then after that, we started to do this like weekly Zoom, where we just like we talk about the book, we talk about life, we talk about like we just connect in every way that we can about the book and like really developing it and thinking about these characters and what they're like and what they wear and who they are and what their backstories and all these things that like we'll just like she'll ask me a question about something and I'll ask her like how she's thinking of depicting something and like we just kind of bounce off each other. So that I think has really strengthened this book in so many ways. Like I think it's visible like that change and that difference and that connection when you read Sisterhood.
100%. Comic books, just being able to interview quite a few writers and quite a few artists. I mean, this day and age is such a global community that you'll have a writer maybe in Canada and an artist in the Philippines, right? And so not always
Yeah.
even speak the same language. So a lot of times it's a little difficult to get on the same page, and you need that, I think, that consistency to get somewhere.
Hmm.
But and correct me if I'm wrong, here you are coming from like the film side where you're sitting at a table with all other writers and you're able to
Yeah.
kind of talk all of these ideas out. And then here you
Totally.
devour where maybe you're just going over email and you're getting pages and but now you're having this Zoom. It almost makes
Yeah.
it feel like the writer's room when you start to create that type of environment where things can flow a little easier. Was that kind of your experience?
I mean, I would say definitely more so. I still feel like Layla and I both feel this way, like that we are kind of isolated in our work, like not from each other per se, but like in general. Like, it's not to say we don't have this team that we're collaborating with. Like, that is absolutely a huge part of this and a huge part. Same with Alex Sinclair. Like, he is a collaborator and he has added so much to this book, and that is evident. But when you work, I'm writing, generally speaking, at home, and like, I'm in my own brain, and like Layla is like a few books behind where I am. So like I don't want to ruin it for her by like I do still picture things like, but I don't want to like completely ruin it for her by like taking her out of the book she's working on. So like there are elements about it that it's still like she comes up with ideas completely on her own based on like, the script and stuff like that. Like she's doing that on her own. And so like, the, you know, that yes, there is definitely more of that environment and that feel, but it is still like can be a little bit isolating in how we work because we're not constantly surrounded by people or being in a room and pitching ideas and being like, what do you think about that idea and what do you think and like whatever. And like luckily I do have Jeff and Brian who have helped me a lot in shaping the story too, to give me feedback, which that has helped. That is more similar, I think, to the writer's room experience.
Yeah. Now, how's that transition been for you going from like a writer's room where you are all together having this conversation to being a comic book writer where there is a little bit more isolation? Do you feel like you're getting more used to that, or do you think it might take a little bit more time before that becomes more comfortable?
I think there are pros and cons in a lot of ways. Like, I think what's cool about, writing comics, it's specifically creator owned and specifically the types that we are telling or independent in some way that aren't necessarily part of a bigger, like, the DC universe or the Marvel universe, like things that are, can be their own stories is I can tell something that is my own and it doesn't necessarily have to be tied to like what the showrunner wants or what someone else's vision, which that part is really cool. Like, so that's a huge pro. And I think in terms of like not having people to bounce ideas off of, like sometimes I think that's great because again, I'm getting to think first for myself without having anybody's voice. But like in not interfering, but changing where my brain is going. And on the flip side of that, sometimes I can't tell if something is working or not working because I'm in my own head and I'm by myself. So it's like so that's usually when I'll turn to Brian or Jeff or someone on the team or someone for help or advice. But in general, like I am writing and I'm just like, okay, I'm going to write it. I'm going to hope that this version works, and then when I get feedback, we'll know if it works or not. Like but sometimes that can be difficult and challenging because I just don't, I'm still learning to identify those things within myself. And Jeff always says it's easier to note someone else's story than it is your own. Like it's easier to identify those things in someone else's story than it is on your own. And that's so true because I'm so in it. I'm so with the characters. And I don't necessarily always know if like this is going to speak to people or appeal to people, or if this is interesting enough, or this twist makes sense, or if I made it too logic-y, or like, I sometimes get caught in my head because of that. So those are kind of the pros and cons, I think, of like working in isolation versus working with a group of people where you can, bounce ideas off of each other and get other people's ideas, which will give you more to think about yourself, which I do think is true once we're sending the pages, like, and then we're all talking and like, and once we're seeing the color and like, then we're all having a conversation, or Rob with the lettering, like definitely there are moments, where we're bouncing off of each other because we have each other. But it's a little bit different than that you're sitting at a table with everybody just chatting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you had the experience yet where maybe you get some art from Layla and then you're looking at it and then you make a little bit of an adjustment to your writing because maybe you saw something in the art and
Absolutely.
you're like, whoa, that looks cool. Yeah.
All the time,
Yeah.
all the time. I literally I will take Layla's pages, I'll put them all together like before the book's even, before the book's even completely done, and I'll look at it and I'll have my dialogue next to it and I'll say, okay, does this look like what the character's saying? And we've even gone back and like changed, some of the conversations to be completely different conversations because it didn't work as well once we were seeing it with the pages because of the expressions or this or that. And that's great. That's not a bad thing, right? that's saying, how can we make this stronger? How can we make it match more with what we're seeing? Because we want that to have that like synergy.
That's
So
awesome.
yes, absolutely. I do that all the time.
Now, with a TV show, especially if you're on for like a few seasons, like, do you ever, like, where do you get that feeling of accomplishment when it comes to like TV? Because, right, you have a season, there's a certain amount of episodes. Like, how do you get that accomplishment? And with like a sisterhood or a one shot like Devour, do you feel like accomplishment quicker since like the actual comic is done and now it's in a
Yeah.
shop? Like, what is that feeling of accomplishment? Is it the same or is it a lot different between the two mediums?
That's a really interesting question. I do think I will say for me, what's different because I'm not in a position of like the showrunner who is deciding, making all of those final decisions. When I was in TV, I was never at that high of a level. So, it's a little different because like, yeah, you might feel accomplished when you see the show on TV, but it's still like you still know that like, especially when it's like when I wrote my episode, I felt so accomplished. Like when we were sitting around and I had some friends and we were watching and it's like your name is on screen and yeah, that's like, oh my God, look at that. Like I wrote that. But at the same time, like feeling a physical book and like seeing it and like seeing how people react to it, it's a completely different feeling for me at least. I can't speak to everybody's experience with it, but like for me, it's like, oh, this is something that you can hold in your hand and show and bring around. And like, yeah, I don't even know if my parents watched, my Stargirl stuff. Like, like I think my dad like started at season one and then was like, oh yeah, I tried to watch or something like that. Like, like I'm like, okay, that's fine. They didn't watch most things that I made. So like, but they're reading the comic books that I'm writing because they're like, oh, yeah, I bought a copy. I went to the store. Like, it's like
That's
part of the experience. So like, I think it feels there's some elements that feel similar and some that feel different, like a different sense of accomplishment. And it also feels more vulnerable because I'm like, this is me on the page. Like, this is my writing. This is me. There's no other, this is my, me and my team. Obviously, Layla's going to feel the same way about her art when people see it in the same you know way that I feel it about the writing. But like if people don't respond well to this, like there's no barrier. There's no like, oh well, I was writing on someone else's show and they rewrote me. Like it, there's literally like, well, it's us. Like we're the people who are going to take that on. And so we hope that everybody loves it because then you feel much better about it. But like as I said at the beginning of this conversation, like if someone doesn't like it, like that's okay. Like that's not going to stop me from writing. That's just going to teach me to try harder or motivate me to try harder, even though I think I'm trying pretty hard.
I'm sure you're trying hard enough. I'm sure, yes. Well, I mean, I've absolutely loved it. I told you before we hit recording, I do listen to a lot of reviews on YouTube, and I can't tell it. I maybe listened to like six, and I think four of the six had Sisterhood as one of their top
Oh, that's
comments of the
awesome.
week. Maytal, so I mean, congratulations on that. That is
Thank
absolutely
you.
phenomenal. I love the story. The artwork is beautiful. Do we know how many issues this is going to be? Is it going to be like a six
Yeah.
series?
It's a 5-issue miniseries.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So
awesome.
it's 5 issues, start to finish. And then yeah, it's cool because it's different than like a one shot and I got more pages to tell the story. So that was really awesome. But yeah, 5 issues.
Sweet. Maybe you can't say anything, but do you already have something kind of in the works with Ghost Machine for after Sisterhood? Or
So I can't really say too much, but yeah, we're always working on like we always are working on more things and more projects. And like Layla and I are gonna keep working together. I'm sure you know that she has an exclusive contract with Ghost Machine now. So like we're gonna keep working together as a team and creating stuff. So like that's a really exciting thing, like to know that this is my partner in this and this is my teammate, and we can keep creating these awesome stories. So like yes, there will definitely be more. There's more coming. Don't you worry.
very good. Well, Maytal, I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed my conversation and getting to know you today. You're an amazing human being. I loved your writing. Devour One Shot was awesome. Sisterhood has been amazing. Cannot wait to read the entire 5 issue series. Below, I'm going to put everything to make it very easy for people to get over to Ghost Machine. They can obviously learn a little bit more about you and your experiences and everything that you've accomplished. Obviously, if they want to buy through Ghost Machine, they can. I encourage you to get out in your comic book shops and pick up Sisterhood if you
Absolutely.
haven't picked it up yet, and make sure you put it in your pull box. It is a 5 issue series, so just get them in your pull box. They'll be ready for you every month when you go in to pick it up. But Maytal, thank you so much. I've had a blast talking to you today, and it's so good to get to know you.
Thank you, Tommy. This has been amazing. Like, this has been such an incredible conversation. I honestly, you're like, if they want to learn more about you, I'm like, I think they're going to learn a lot about me here,
Oh, I
like in
hope
this
so.
conversation. But thank you. Seriously, this has been such a pleasure. I really enjoyed being here. And yeah, pick up Sisterhood. I hope you like it.
Yeah, yeah, you definitely will. And then Maytal, maybe after issue 5, I would love to have you back on and we could dig more
Absolutely.
into the story so that way I don't feel like I'm giving away anything. That way
Yeah, I
people
totally
can
get it.
experience for the first time. But if you're available and you're not too busy, I'll reach out if that's okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Would love to. This has been so much fun for me.
Awesome. Well, everybody, make sure that you're following Maytal. I'll have all of her socials below. I'll have the Ghost Machine link to Sisterhood and to her own bio over at Ghost Machine. Maytal, thank you so much. I hope you have a
Thank
great
you.
rest of your weekend and can't wait to talk soon.
Thanks. You too.
All right, bye.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.